we've sort of mentioned, very much in terms of the Black Panther Party, their relation with AIM, both as sort of an inspiration and also material aid. You briefly touched on Chicano movements providing guns at Wounded Knee. So I want to sort of get the relationship that AIM had with sort of the new left movements that AIM is kind of a part of in a way as well. The Puerto Rican independence movements, the Chicano movements, the Black Power movements, and then also, and I'm almost scared to ask this question, what was the relations with the old left, with CPUSA, if there was any, the Socialist Party, which I mean is still around, various Trotskyist groups. I mean, the old left was very much back then CPUSA, when now I would say like the old left would almost include DSA, but DSA wasn't around then. Like it's weird thing how time works. So what was AIM's sort of relations with very much socialist, Marxist, communist, old left and new left?
It's interesting conversation to have, at least. There's like I said, there's this factionalization that happens. So like initially there's like this broad group support from like, and like not even just talking about US left or Canadian left politics, but like, we have the Sandinistas giving support. We have, when Leonard Peltier goes to prison, there's a whole rally for him in the Red Square in Moscow. There's Russell Means ends up in China around Tiananmen Square. With David, my uncle from the picture that he flipped with Dave, and Jesse Jackson. I don't know. Very weird. But
all three of those people have very different politics. I love it. It's hilarious.
Well, I'd say David's and Russ's are closer, but like also there's like you need to build a dual power structure from David that Russell just gave lip service to. Anyway, I look at them very closely, so I have a lot of thoughts on their differences and similarities. But yeah, so like there is this interesting connection, right, between the new left and the old left, because you see like the camps bringing CPUSA and the Chicanos, and that's due to like their if you're organizing on the West Coast, who you're fucking gonna run into a lot, Chicanos, and so like there was like these in-depth discussions and conversations about whether the Chicanos constitute indigenous people and should be included on DRIP, yada yada yada, and the ultimate conclusion is that they're a settler, like it's a result of settlerism, and that's just the facts of it. So it's not correct to call them indigenous due to like the relations that produce that nation, but they are still a nation. They are oppressed. There is representation that must be given and considered when talking about the specific conditions that their nation faces and how to overcome them, right, in liberation, especially as communists. But like obviously AIM, it's a whole thing, and then there's like pretendians and who are influencing the conversation. So there's not, and then you have Zionist natives like Hank Adams, who was like that guy who wrote the Trail Broken Treaties earlier. I should have said that up front, Zionist, but a lot of it was like due to like political expediency. Vine Deloria Jr.'s support for Zionism was political expediency of, if Jewish people can have their land back, give us ours back, you fuckers. Like when I look at that situation, it does not seem as cut and dry as you're making it out to be, but and that's why like AIM would connect with like PLO and all kinds of groups across the world, with different stories to accompany them, from one auntie or another, and like it's interesting when looking at it, because like there's not the same connections between these factions, right? And then like some take on an antagonistic relation. So like the Chicano movement in Denver did not mesh well with Denver Dakota AIM, whereas like the autonomous groups that were more supportive of Carter Camp. Oh, I don't know. I'm bleeding for some reason. That's weird. What? 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 I must have picked a scab, but I was like, "There's something wet on my armrest. It's my blood."
You hit a corner of a table wrong. You didn't realize that happens.
Something like that. But yeah, so like, there's like this antagonistic contradiction coming about due to like a non-consideration through a Marxist perspective of what this constitutes, how to move forward. Like, you can't go backwards. That's not an option. To want to go backwards is appealing to reaction and fascism. The only way to maintain one's tradition is to move forward and evolve. You can't stay the same. Nobody stays the same. No group of people stays the same. You are always changing. Society always changes due to the material conditions. So, and it's not hard to imagine like how we can cooperate with a Chicano, a New African, it's not hard to imagine new ways of cooperating. Then one group gets total control of the land, and at the root of all these is a land issue. And so like you even have like white people with like the Back to the Land movement, joining in, or like the video freaks, like I was mentioning. That's definitely a new left group nobody knows about, but like weird, but these are all, they're all influencing them, and that's what causes the eclectism, really, is that like there is a level of democratic centralism within like national aim, but then you have all these other different groups of aim. None of them are really like paying attention to like national all the time, unless it's like in the news, so they're just doing their own thing, and that's how you get a little Nazi chapter, like what? And so like, there was a lot of promise towards future relations and building like, what we saw in like Berkeley and stuff was like a lot of the third worldist movement would help support getting natives heard as well, because we were so constantly erased from the conversation. And that's due to like the fourth world theory that George Manuel puts forth. And George Manuel was also a huge influence on the Trail of Broken Treaties, from the Canadian perspective. And we just have this, there's no definitive answer, right, to how did they fare, because AIM is such this complex history that, you have some factions smuggling children into Cuba to participate in the Youth World Fair or whatever it's called. And like Marcella Gilbert is one of the kids who went there, and she also went to like Stockholm to speak to the UN and stuff as a young kid, and actually went to PLO. Like, this is a young woman doing all of this, a teenager, just organizing, because it's a family thing. Madonna Thunderhawk, her mother, she famously says it's a movement of families, and we never really saw like a family of movements that, an inverse of that had those tight relationships in between each other, but were able to maintain a degree of cellular independence, if you will, like a unity through disunity sort of situation. And so, unfortunately, we never saw that coalesce, but a lot of that has to do with infiltration from the feds and stuff. And it's unfortunate that we don't understand this period of history better, right? Like, it's hard to understand. It's been hard like, I've spent almost a half decade of my life. Oh no, I've spent a half decade of my life studying this very in depth, more in depth than most people. And I see it as the perfect lens to start solving the contradictions that are causing a lot of the inability to unify in any meaningful sense. I think it's very relevant that such a perfect encapsulation of the continuation of colonialism into the modern period can be viewed through AIM, and even like a neo-colonial absorption of these radical groups. So like now, after the George Floyd uprisings, AIM started doing community policing and kicking out homeless people. from the Native community. And during the uprisings, that Native community, the elders took it upon themselves to arm themselves and keep the National Guard out of, it's called Little Earth. So they call it an urban res. And, they make it a point to keep them out and protect their people. And then AIM becomes this policing group that starts kicking out houseless relatives that need help, and then create the camp that the federal government's already doing on the West Coast. They did it themselves, and then like Red Nation supported it. Maybe Little Earth should make space in Little Earth to protect these people. I don't know. Maybe I'm speaking too far out of line, but I'd love to hear somebody's perspective from that, because the people I have heard aren't very impressed with AIM after that. And we have this part of the Sundance where we let Heyoka, or sacred clowns, come in and like preach through dance, essentially, the issues, right, that we're facing and need to overcome. And so one of my friends took a Clyde Bellacourt poster and tore it up in front of people's faces, because he was a hero to many people at one point, but while he's sitting there claiming to be sober, he's doing a bunch of cocaine with movement money. When you read these guys' books, it's like a lot of the times they're talking about they were sober. There's a bunch of cocaine usage going on that none of them want to fucking acknowledge, and it's very aggravating as somebody who knows like the tea, I'm like, I've talked to your cousins, you fuckers, I wish you were. Well, and that's the thing is we were supposed to get Clyde's last interview, and his Alzheimer's it was sad. It was really sad. And, I do say constantly, don't meet your heroes, but it's still sad to see, somebody deteriorate like that, cognitively, that had such an influence on the movement you organize in, hopefully towards a better end, right? So it's a give or take relationship with the old and new left, but we see countless examples of cooperation, and the main hurdle being a failure to fully encapsulize the decolonial struggle in that moment,